So this week we will be looking at Tormented Souls, and although I will be predominantly focusing on the PS5 version, I do have the Nintendo Switch port, and I will be speaking about that version later on in the video. Tormented Souls was co-developed by Abstract Digital Works and Dual Effect, and was published by P-Cube in August of 2021 for the PC and PS5. In September of 2021 it got a release on the Xbox Series consoles. The game was initially going to have a Xbox One and PS4 release at launch, however these versions got cancelled during 2021. However, they did end up releasing in February of 2022, but we're not quite sure why they got cancelled, or if they just got delayed internally. Just before the game was released, it was confirmed that the game will be getting a physical release on Nintendo Switch and PS5. These versions wouldn't be released until April of 2022. In May of 2022, just after the physical copies were released, it was announced that across all the platforms, Tormented Souls had sold 250,000 copies. The premise of the game is that you play as Caroline Walker, and after receiving a letter from a John Doe with the address of Wild Burger Hospital, inside the envelope there is a photo of two twin girls and a mysterious message on the back, and as a result she decides to head to Wild Burger Hospital to see if she can figure out who sent the photo and why she had a strange headache when she saw it. Upon arriving at the hospital, she is very quickly knocked unconscious by a mysterious figure, and when she awakes she finds that she is naked with an eye missing and attached to a ventilator. Dazed and confused, Caroline sets out to explore the now abandoned mansion turned hospital to see if she can discover what happened to the two twin girls and also uncover what is happening in the hospital as a whole. Like with most survival horror games, a majority of the story is told by files you collect as you traverse the mansion. That's not to say that there is no story as you progress, as there are cutscenes, and these for the most part tell you where to go next. And if you don't read the files you collect, then it won't be until towards the end of the game that things will become clearer and make more sense. Speaking about the cutscenes, I do want to talk about the line delivery, and that is that in the case of Caroline, as her line delivery seems to be very overacted and at times kill the atmosphere the game had created up to that point. The pacing of the game is quite good if you do read the files, as each file you collect will give you a bit of information that you can glean from it. Either it will give you a small part towards the overall story, or it will give you clues that you can use to solve puzzles that you will come across. Speaking of atmosphere, I loved it in this game. As you explore the mansion, it has a good balance of being creepy and wanting to progress further and explore. Overall, I did enjoy the story of the game, but sadly I did see the twists coming from the beginning, and I also wish that the voice actors had better direction when giving their lines, but thankfully there aren't too many cutscenes in the game, so this isn't a huge issue. Tormented Souls is a return to the classic survival horror genre, which sees the player needing to be careful with their resources in order to progress. As a result, the game feels like the older Resident Evil and Silent Hill games, where you'll need to gather items to solve puzzles and find limited ammo and health items. Like with older survival horror games, one of the main things you will be doing in the game is solving puzzles you find while exploring the mansion. These puzzles can take quite a few forms. You have ones which will see you needing to use a special key in order to open doors, one which you will be needing to examine items and objects in the environment and potentially combining items in order to solve them. An example from early in the game is where you need to open a door by replicating the rhythm of a heartbeat on a door knocker. With the puzzles you find, there will be clues and hints to the player, be that through notes that you find near the puzzle location or through cutscenes, in the case of the operating room puzzle, which from what I've seen online quite a few people had issues with. As you explore the mansion, you will encounter enemies. The enemies in this game can at times be quite quick, but if you are stealthy then you can slip past them undetected. If the enemies do see you, then you will need to take them out. The most common way of doing this will be using a nail gun that you find early on in the game. This acts as your basic pistol. For those of you who prefer melee, then you can use the crowbar, which you also find early on in the game. The easiest way I found to take out enemies was to shoot them until they drop to the floor, and then use my crowbar to finish them off to save precious ammo. Much like with Mr. X in RE2 and Nemesis in RE3, this game does feature a stalker enemy, but as the trigger for this enemy is random, all you need to do to avoid it is as soon as you hear his specific audio cue, just exit the room and re-enter and he will despawn. You can get more powerful weapons in the game, as you can create a shotgun made out of old pipes and a shock stick thing, I guess. Both of these will deal more damage, so it's better to save these for tougher fights. If you do end up dying in Tormented Souls, then you'll be forced back to the title screen where you'll have to reload your last save, so saving smartly is crucial. Like with the older RE games, you have limited saves. You can heal yourselves to avoid death by finding shots of adrenaline and on the rare occasions first aid kits. Shots of adrenaline act as green herbs in the RE games, where they only restore a small amount of health, but first aid kits are full heals. There are two different control styles in Tormented Souls. The first is that you use the control stick and you'll get full 360-degree controls of Caroline, and if you use the D-pad you would get tank controls like the older RE and Silent Hill games. I played with the modern controls, and the only issue I had was when it came with the camera switching positions. I'd have to readjust the control stick as Caroline would veer off in a different direction while I corrected her. Overall, I enjoyed the gameplay, but I just wish that a few of the things could have been tightened up more. From a graphical perspective, Tormented Souls is a very pretty looking game, as it uses semi-fixed camera angles, and by that I mean that the camera does move along with Caroline, but you can't control it using the right stick, and as you progress to certain parts of the mansion, the camera angle will shift. So the camera style is more akin to what was found in, I believe it was Code Veronica, where the camera would follow along the characters. Soundtrack and sound design, I did like the soundtrack, sadly wasn't that memorable to me, but the sound design I thought was quite good, as the different gun sounds, they were quite distinct from one another. Speaking of sound design, going back to the stalker enemy I talked about earlier, there is a very specific audio cue that you will note when you hear it to know that the stalker is in the room, and like mentioned previously, just exit the room and enter it and they will despawn. Now, speaking of the switchboard, the switchboard was actually the first version of the game that I played, but I didn't get that far in it, and so I put it down, and after I got the PS5 port was when I picked up the game again. But the switch port is actually a decent way of playing Tormented Souls, and the fact that it's on the go is a bonus. The only big issue that I saw was some of the cutscenes, the quality is obviously lower. A example that comes to mind is early on in the game when Caroline goes through the mirror, it looks really choppy, but besides from that, the switch port is a pretty solid way of playing the game, and if it's the only way you have of playing it, I would recommend you get it. So those are my thoughts on Tormented Souls. Have you played the game? If so, I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comment section down below. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.